April 23rd, 2024 City of Portland Planning Commission meeting. I am the chair, Mary Rain O'Mara, and I'm joined in the room by Commissioner Lang, Commissioner Routh, Commissioner Alexander, and Commissioner Patel. Online, we have Vice Chair Pouncil and Commissioner Spivak. And today's agenda includes the consent agenda, per usual. We will then have a briefing from the Portland Urban Forest Plan team. And then we will have a work session regarding the Land Division Code Update Project. So with that overview, I'm going to first ask if there are any items of interest from commissioners. Commissioner Rath, go ahead.
I noticed today on the blog, on the website, that there's a announcement that we're recruiting for our 9th planning commissioner, which is so exciting. And I will just register sadness that it is not for a youth commissioner. I hope that that can change in future. We had conversations when we were propping up the bylaws and guides for the Planning Commission, newly constituted. And when we had the Planning and Sustainability Commission, we did have a youth commissioner, because for a few reasons. One, particularly for long-range planning, that the people that have the greatest stake are our young people, and that creating a position for a youth commissioner is an important way to build the bench. So I understand that that is not the way we are recruiting this time, but I am desperately hoping that in the next iteration, when we're looking to recruit again, that we can institute that and go get that, because I think that that is critically important for developing leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Routh, and agree with your comments. I think that we had this on our commissioner retreat, and unfortunately we were not able to get to the discussion around the youth commissioner. But my sense is that we do want to build our bench of the regular commissioners and then look to the future for that youth commissioner opening, which is part of our operating guidelines. I believe we're referring to them. And it's also my hope that we can have a little bit more discussion if commissioners are interested at the next retreat regarding that, and just really cement what our plan is regarding recruitment of a youth commissioner. So thank you so much for those comments. Any other items of interest from commissioners? Commissioner Spivak, go ahead.
I'll just volunteer that I agree with the sentiments mentioned previously, and there's no minimum age for any of our commissioner slots. So youth are encouraged to apply.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Spivak. Any other items of interest? Okay. Thank you for those. And I will invite Patricia to see if you have a director's report, or Julie, did you have an item?
Yeah, the recap transmittal letter is the.
Oh, thank you for that reminder. Yes, we do have the recap 10 letter drafted to council. I did review that, and I submitted just a small edit regarding the childcare facility. It just needed a slight modification, which Julie has captured in that wording. Were there any other comments or questions regarding the drafted letter? Okay, and that is scheduled to go to City Council, is at May 25th?
Sorry, May 23rd as of
May
now.
23rd.
It's a little
Okay.
in flux, but that is the current date.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there a thumbs up on that letter from the full commission? Okay. Do we normally take a vote on that, or we just, okay. Great.
I think we are thumbs up
All right.
to proceed.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Chair O'Mara. Patricia Diefenderfer, Chief Planner, for the record. Do you have a brief director's report? One of the items on the director's report, thank you, Commissioner Routh, was to update the commission on the fact that we have opened up the recruitment for our ninth Planning Commission position. So we are now actively recruiting for that one open position. The position was posted yesterday on the city's jobs board. And Julie will provide a link to that for in the email that we follow up with the minutes, so that you have that in case you want to look at it and or share it with your networks. That recruitment will be open through May 13th at 5 p.m. The timing of this is that we are looking to go to council at the end of June with the goal of having a new commissioner seated by July, so that hopefully that person who is chosen can join us in July. So this recruitment will fill, as I said, the current vacancy, which will be a partial term, right? Because we did not fill the position immediately, and it will be one of the positions that will be the four-year term, but it will really be 2.5 years effectively by the time the person joins. And just as a reminder, we do have, currently, there are 5 commissioners whose terms, as you know, when we started the new commission, we had staggered terms. There are 5 commissioners whose terms were 2-year terms that actually end in February of 2025. And then only 3 people on the commission currently have terms that go through February of 2027. So this would be a 4th position going through February 2027. And of course, that is the intention there, is to have staggered and try to have some continuity, as we will also be having quite a bit of change potentially, right? When we have to fill the positions again in February of 2025. So I just also wanted to touch upon quickly the conversation around the youth commissioner. I do appreciate those comments, and I think staff feels similarly. There's a great deal of value to having a youth commissioner. The considerations right now were just how new this commission is, and how very much we're working on building up the capacity and the expertise of this commission, and trying to really stabilize this commission so that we can have good succession in terms of people filling the officer roles. So we look forward to future conversations about the youth commissioner position, and when would be really a good time, a strategic time for us to look at filling a position with a youth commissioner in the future. And I just wanted to also put this in the context of, all of the change that we're going through right now. The city is obviously going through a change of government, and that's taking a lot of our time and capacity, and just trying to evolve with the changes that are happening in the city. And onboarding commissioners certainly takes a lot of staff capacity, so we appreciate your consideration of that as well. So that's the update on that matter. Wanted to just give you kind of, for your awareness, that 2 items are going to be at council this week, Wednesday and Thursday, that are items of interest to the commission. On Wednesday, the council will be hearing the Sustainability and Climate Commission. So that's the first reading of an ordinance to establish that new commission. And then the council is going to be hearing the Lower Southeast Rising Plan on Thursday. And Chair O'Mara will be there to present the Planning Commission's recommendation. So we appreciate that, Chair O'Mara. Thank you. So that's exciting for the commission. We look forward to council hopefully swiftly approving that project. Finally, I just want to provide some reminders about upcoming Planning Commission meeting schedule. So as you know, we have some kind of we're deviating from the schedule a little bit. On May 14th, as you know, there will not be a full Planning Commission meeting, but we will have trainings on the tax increment financing districts in preparation for items that will be coming to the commission later in the fall. And as you know, there are 2 different time slots, so we look forward to you letting us know which time slots work best for you among the 2. On May 21st, this is a meeting that we're adding to the schedule. It will be an evening meeting, so it will start at 5 p.m., and that is the meeting that we will have a joint hearing with the Design Commission. So the Planning Commission and Design Commission will have a joint hearing on the Montgomery Park area plan. And then finally, May 28th will be a regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting that will also be an evening meeting that will start at 5 p.m. So those are just some scheduling items that we want you to be aware of and have on your calendar. I think that concludes the sort of director's report, so please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patricia. A logistics question for the May 21st meeting, since that will be a large group. Is the plan to hold that in person here? And is there space to accommodate both commissions?
That is the plan. I'll let Julie elaborate on that. Thanks.
Yeah, currently Design Commission is meeting all virtually, so we've invited them to attend in person, but the likelihood that a number of them will be virtual. So we'll, if we need to squeeze, we'll squeeze, but yeah, so part and part.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on director's report?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Pouncil. I was just curious if, well, I would imagine though this is going to be in the online calendar of these, the May 14th, the 24th, and the 28th. Those, I'm sure that they will be, right?
Vice Chair Pouncil, we can send you calendar appointments if you like.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what our typical, okay, so Julie's confirming that the meetings are on the calendar associated with your portlandoregon.gov email address.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then I on the training for the tax increment, I don't know if I've received those dates for the timing. Maybe I have, and I've forgotten it.
I can
There's
just
a lot going on.
I can resend your invite because I see you on here, but I'll just resend it to you.
Okay. Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Sure. And just to clarify for the record, the meeting that you reference is on May 21st rather than May 24th. I just want to make sure that's clear. And so for everyone's memory, thanks.
Thank you, Patricia. Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, Commissioner Lang, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Alexander? And we are taking an aye vote. So all commissioners in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. And we will now proceed to our presentation by the Portland Urban Forest Plan team. So I would like to welcome up Brian Lando and Belinda Judelman. And please correct my pronunciation when you introduce yourselves if I did not get that right. But welcome you both up here for the forestry plan update.
All right. All right. Thanks, everyone. We're excited to be here. So yeah, I'm Brian Lando, Strategy and Planning Manager with Urban Forestry. And then I'll let Belinda introduce herself also.
Hi, I'm Belinda Judelman, Planning and Policy Analyst with Urban Forestry and the Project Manager for the Portland Urban Forest Plan. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, so I have a PowerPoint to share. So let me get that pulled up and then we can dive right in. Okay, is that showing up for everyone online? Great, sounds good. Okay, so yeah, we are here to talk about Portland's urban forest plan. This is the sort of guiding strategic plan for how we manage trees in the city. So before I get started, I want to make a quick distinction because we're going to be coming back in a couple of months, I believe, to talk about a potential code change to Title 11. It's referred to as the Large Tree Stopgap Amendment. So I just want to distinguish between this planning process and that potential code amendment that's coming up, and the different roles of different advisory commissions within those. So with the code amendments that we have that we'll be briefing you on, I believe that's in June, it might be July, but Julie will correct me. We'll be going to both Planning Commission and the Urban Forestry Commission. And under Title 11, the city's tree code, both those bodies have distinct advisory roles as part of the process of bringing code amendments. This is a distinct planning process from that. So just wanted to draw that. And then, yeah, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about really like why we're here, why we plan for trees, why we manage trees in the city, and some of the issues that we're trying to get at as part of this process. And then Belinda will talk more specifically about the urban forest plan itself. So just from the start, I want to clarify what we mean by the urban forest. So urban forestry is a division of Parks and Recreation, and our role really is to manage how we care for, how we grow the urban forest, and that really applies to every tree in the city. So as part of this planning process, we're looking at trees in parks, trees on private property in people's yards, street trees, natural areas. So when we talk about the urban forest, we're really trying to treat every tree in the city in that sense. And so why are we here? Trees do a lot of work for us, particularly urban trees. They are just, we seem to learn a little bit more every year about the importance of trees in terms of their impact they have on environmental health, the impact they have on human health, but the impact on our environmental systems as well. So some things are more understood than others. People would know that trees clean our air, they provide oxygen, they provide habitat. But really in the last few years, particularly with some of the heat dome events we've been experiencing and just our hotter summers overall, the role they play in mitigating heat islands in cities. So yeah, trees do a lot of work for us. And so it's one of the reasons that we're going through an update to the urban forest plan. Another thing that really drives this work is people do not have equal access to trees in Portland. This is true of most cities in the US, but it is particularly true here. Portland has a citywide canopy goal right now of 33%. And so when we're talking about canopy, in particular canopy coverage, it's really every part of the city that is covered by some part of a tree. So the way we describe it, if you're standing outside, you look up, there's tree foliage over you, that counts as canopy coverage. So we have a citywide goal of 33%. We are at around 29.8% right now, which might feel like it's somewhat close, but depending on where you live in the city, it really drives what that looks like for you. So currently west of the Willamette River, tree canopy coverage is about 56%. But only about 20% of Portlanders live west of the river. The other 80% are on the east side, where canopy coverage is about 22%. And to put that into context, the city of Los Angeles has a similar canopy coverage of around 22%. So you can really, it's a very different lived reality. And unfortunately, as we see with so many outcomes, those things are largely driven by race and income level. So looking at how we approach that challenge is one of the key things that we're looking at as part of this plan.
Right. So what is the Portland Urban Forest Plan? So this plan is an update to the city's existing 2004 Urban Forest Management Plan. So new plan, but not a new concept. This plan will have a 10-year timeframe. So it's sort of our 10-year guide for the way that we will preserve, plant, and care for trees and help us do so equitably and sustainably. This plan will have a vision, goals, strategies, actions, and priorities, and we'll use it to influence and guide all of our programs and budget decisions, activities, for everything we do to help act as managers for the urban forest. So throughout this process, we are working very heavily with community to create a vision for and goals for the future that we want to see, and we'll use this plan to help us achieve that vision. Go to the next. So how are we creating this plan, and when are we doing the work? So we started back in fall, is when we kicked off, and are sort of thinking of this work in terms of 3 different phases. So we have phase 1, which is really about listening to community, looking at all the data we have, and learning what we're doing, how it's working, and assessing where we're at. Then phase 2, which we're just about to start in the spring, and we'll go through into fall, is all about thinking about the future. So we'll be creating a vision, goals, and recommendations and actions to get us there. And then finally, in phase 3, we'll document everything we've done, everything we've heard from community, how we're using that feedback, and create the plan itself. And we'll share that plan with the public for review. So in this first phase, just to give you a little more sense of what everything I just said, what that really means. So we're using a lot of information as we create this plan. So we're looking at our canopy data, we're looking at feedback from staff and all of the different bureaus and work groups that play a role in managing the urban forest. We're talking to community, and we're looking at what other cities are doing. How are other cities managing their urban forest? How are they approaching the same challenges that we're facing here? So in this first phase, we are looking at where is canopy, kind of diving deeper than to the maps that Brian had just shared. We're looking at how resilient our urban forest is to climate change, how prepared are we for urban heat, for winter storms, new pests and diseases. We're also looking at who has access to canopy and who doesn't, and more than just, are there trees in your neighborhood, but what does caring for trees really mean? How does that impact your life? We're also looking at where is canopy declining, where is it growing, and why? What kinds of information, support, resources do we as a city need to be better caretakers of the urban forest, and what kinds of resources does the community need from us? So it's been a lot of information that we're gathering during this first phase, and that will really inform the rest of the project. So I'm not going to go into detail, but just want to give you a taste of some of the things we've been looking at as we've been moving through this first phase. So we've been looking at canopy coverage in a kind of more detailed and nuanced way than we have in the past, which you can see on the upper left-hand map. And then we're also looking at canopy change. So that map shows by neighborhood. So where are we seeing increases in canopy over the last few years, and where are we seeing declines? And we're also looking at canopy cover using our new council districts. So kind of diving a little bit deeper into that sort of just east-west, but really looking at what is the difference in these different areas. And our council districts have fairly equal populations, so it's sort of a more interesting way to look at canopy distribution than just by neighborhood or east-west, which have such different populations. We've also been looking at canopy cover over different elements of our transportation network. So for example, we have neighborhood walkways, which are defined in our city's pedestrian plan and our transportation system plan. So these are streets that are, the city is really intending to prioritize for walking and biking for people of all ages and abilities. So part of making a comfortable environment for that is tree canopy cover. So we've been looking at those neighborhood walkways in different parts of the city. That tells a similar story to what we've been seeing in all of the other maps, but just in a slightly different way of which communities have more access to trees when they walk to school or ride their bike, and things like that. So we've also been diving into canopy cover by land use throughout the city and looking at change over time. This will inform us as we're developing our canopy targets, which is one of the key tasks for this plan. And then thinking about heat and heat vulnerability. So we've been looking at heat and canopy cover in different ways and are still kind of evolving our analysis of this approach, but just looking at where are the hottest parts of the city, where are vulnerable populations, where is tree canopy cover, and how can we use that to inform our approach for how we preserve and plant and care for trees in the future. So in addition to looking at all of that canopy data and a lot more data than just what we shared, we've also been talking to community and staff. So a big part of this is I'll use for the rest of the, want to focus on for the rest of the presentation is how we're doing that, how we're talking to people. So we have 3 advisory committees that are informing this work. First is a technical advisory committee. So this includes staff from at least 8 different bureaus, all bureaus that have some kind of role in urban forest management, whether that's transportation, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability has multiple staff involved in this advisory committee. We also have the Bureau of Emergency Management, Fire and Rescue, all the infrastructure bureaus, really trying to just hear from the different bureaus and work groups who are involved with that. We also have representation from our county, from the region, from Metro, and from the state. And then next, we have a community advisory committee. So this is made up of folks who, some who have interacted with urban forest management in Portland parks in the past, but mostly folks who are new to that, really just providing that perspective of what's it like to be a Portlander, and interact with trees. What are the things you think about? What are your concerns, your priorities, your challenges? So we've been working with that group very closely every step of the way of this process. And our third advisory group is the Urban Forestry Commission. So that's another existing commission that, according to Title 11, our tree code has a direct advisory role in this project. So we are meeting with them regularly, keeping them informed and getting their guidance as we go through this process. We've also been meeting with other city advisory groups beyond the Urban Forestry Commission. That's part of why we're here today, just to make sure that we're really hitting everyone who may be interested in this work, to make sure we are aware of what's going on, how you can provide input, and make sure we hear your priorities. We are providing a lot of opportunities to engage with the public as well. We're trying to be as kind of all-encompassing as we can, providing opportunities to engage online, in person, at different stages in the process and in different ways, so we can really hear from the broadest group that we can, both, kind of historical tree and environmental groups that have been doing this work for a long time, but also just everyday Portlanders who don't usually provide feedback in this kind of process. And throughout all of this, our community advisory committee, all of our engagement with the public, we are doing our best to center our engagement with underserved communities. So we are doing focus groups specifically intended to hear from these groups. We're providing stipends, providing meals, really taking as flexible of an approach as we can to make it as easy for different communities to engage with us as we can. So this slide is just a visual to give you a little bit more of a detailed perspective of how we're engaging with community throughout the process. So we did a round of focus groups, which we are just wrapping up. We'll do another one in the fall. And those are all geared towards our underserved communities, so Black community, Indigenous community, folks who engage in other languages, people with disabilities, renters, parents, youth, older adults. And then for the general public, we have our open house, which is coming up tomorrow. And then we'll have another one in the fall. We're doing a citywide survey, which will be open for 2 more weeks. And then in the fall, we'll have the draft plan that will be ready for review by everyone. And throughout this entire process, that last line in the graphic, the discussions, presentations, and tabling, that's really as we go through, we're really evaluating who we're hearing from and who we aren't hearing from, and using these other discussions, presentations to try to make up for that. So if we weren't hearing from a certain group in a focus group, we'll have a presentation, meet with the groups, host discussions, table, et cetera, just to make sure we're hearing from as many people as we can. So last, just want to give a plug for the open house and survey. Our open house is tomorrow at McDaniel High School from 5 to 7:30 p.m. It's an informal event, so you can come and stay for as long as you want. There'll be childcare, refreshments, interpretation services. I hope that some of you will come and bring your friends and neighbors. It's a really great opportunity to hear more about what we've been doing and provide input directly on our what we're thinking about in terms of challenges, what we've been hearing from community, and add your feedback to that. And then our survey, which you can get a link to on our website, that'll be open till May 2nd. It has similar information to what we'll be covering at the open house, but it's just another opportunity to provide feedback on what priorities you have for us to consider. And I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you so much for that. Questions from commissioners?
That one.
Commissioner Lane.
Yeah, how much do you use the 2004 plan that was put together? Has that kind of become the foundation and then build from that what has changed over the last 10 years, or do you just start all over again?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination. We're definitely looking at that, understanding the vision and goals and how we can, how they're working for us and have been working for us and how we want to make changes. There's some, that plan is wonderful, it served its purpose, but there's some things that were lacking. We actually ended up having to create an action plan a few years later because the focus of that plan wasn't as implementation heavy. So with this plan, in that sense, it'll be completely different. It will be very focused on implementation, so once it's ready, we can hit the ground running. If there's anything you want to add.
Commissioner Alexander and then Commissioner Spivak.
Great, thank you. This is very informative. In looking at, you did some comparative analysis of Canopy with LA, but have you looked at other urban areas that have gone through some of the displacement? I mean, there's so much that's happening within these environments. What lends itself to sort of the preservation of a canopy? Or, you know, I have a brother who lives in White Plains and they can cut anything down at any time. I mean, there's nothing that approaches the level of prescription that we have here. Have we seen urban areas that have been advantaged by that?
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. So we are doing, one of the things we're looking at is we are looking at peer cities and trying to get a sense of what are other cities doing, particularly in terms of how they set their canopy goals and how they try to achieve those goals. Portland has seen canopy decline from 2014 to 2019, which is really the first time in several decades that our canopy has gone down. For a long time, Portland was unique amongst mid-sized and large U.S. cities in that our canopy was growing. So I think there are some things that we have been doing really well, not just in the recent history, but over a long term. But it's notable that canopy decline came right as our tree code came into effect, which was in 2015. It also mirrored impacts of climate change and also I think the highest levels of development that we've seen in a long time. So we are looking to see what we can learn from other cities. One thing that's been really interesting to see is the way that how cities kind of map out in terms of canopy cover and then population density as well. Pittsburgh is a city that is a really interesting comparison to Portland in that smaller land area, a smaller population, but actually much higher population density than we have, and they're significantly higher canopy coverage. So I think we are able to find some examples of cities that are accommodating population growth while maintaining and growing their tree canopy.
If I can do a follow-up, and again, Mike Alexander for the record. I'm sorry. In looking at the erosion of the canopy here, has it been targeted within particular areas of the city or across the, I mean, I'm sort of looking at the intersection between
Yeah.
displacement and gentrification in other areas that, where there's the greater and lesser of impacts.
Yeah, in terms of the change that we've seen, it is showing up in particular areas of the city. Mostly, it's following a bit of a sort of a bell curve, where the areas with the highest canopy coverage actually saw the greatest loss. A lot of that in southwest Portland, where I think we have seen a lot of development. But then also the lower canopy areas, mainly in East Portland, saw loss. We saw growth in sort of those middle canopy areas, mostly Northeast Portland. But that's just the change. We know that in areas that been underserved in the past, they have lower canopy to start. Particularly previously red-lined areas are starting with lower canopy. And I know that Professor Chandas at Portland State has done a lot of research on this, showing that Portland, I believe it was that Portland has the greatest discrepancy in canopy coverage between previously red-lined areas and now that than any other city in the U.S. So we know that a lot of these communities are starting from a lower canopy place.
Okay, Commissioner Spivak and then Vice Chair Pouncil.
Thank you so much for that summary. And I was heartened that PSEF funds were used to allocate at least towards tree maintenance. And I'm kind of curious in the forest plan, I'm hoping that you'll look at other cities, and as you look at peer cities, which ones take responsibility as a city to maintain trees in the right of way versus the private property owner. And that would be the trees and also the sidewalk and pavement from lifting roots. So I just wanted to check in to see if that's part of the study, and also note the connection in some, if private property owners are responsible for maintenance, it's having a tree in your front planting strip is an unfunded mandate because you have to take care of it. So there's sort of a disincentive to have it there at all. So I think we'll probably learn from other cities how that, there's some linkages to who's responsible for maintenance. And I wanted to check in to see if that's part of the scope of the plan.
Yeah, so that's absolutely. So just for anyone who may not be as familiar, so street trees in Portland, the responsibility for maintaining those is placed with the adjacent property owner. The city does not maintain those street trees, similar to sidewalks in Portland. Portland's unique amongst most of our peer cities in that the city does not provide that. It's more common on the West Coast in general, but other cities like Seattle have taken steps to take that burden off of the adjacent property owner. And the Clean Energy Fund has proposed sending funding to urban forestry to do that. So when we are looking at other peer cities, we are absolutely looking at what are some of the management approaches that they take. Because we just know that we have different outcomes based on your ability to maintain that tree, whether it's financial, whether it's just having the knowledge of that responsibility. I suspect that most people don't know that it's their responsibility to take care of those trees. And we know from a lot of the outreach we've done around developing our tree planting strategy, the number one reason people don't want a street tree is because of the potential cost burden. So that is something that is very, very top of mind. And I will say that in terms of implementing a street tree maintenance program, this plan won't get into that level of detail or specifics, but definitely looking at what has been the impact of that policy, knowing that we have very different outcomes based on the factors that really lead to whether you are able to maintain a street tree or not.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Pouncil and then Vice Chair Thompson.
Yes, this is Vice Chair Pouncil. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so sorry I'm in a public space here to do this, but so there may be some background noise. But I just wanted to say, thank you for the presentation. I'm aware that a tree canopy in business districts, increase, people tend to spend more money when they're able to be out shopping and, they're purchasing things. So I was just kind of curious, has there been any, have you talked to any of the business community about, tree canopy and business districts? And also, are you going to be, speaking to businesses, let's say in the industrial area, let's say, and I'm specifically speaking of like, Portland Harbor industrial area, and just to, looking at the data that you had shown, it looked like District 2 had the least amount of canopy out of all the districts there, and there was a big swath of that, at Swan Island that kind of had a really low canopy cover. So I'm just wondering if those are some things that you guys are going to be looking into.
Yeah, great question. So I'll speak to the outreach around in industrial land use first, and I think Belinda can talk a little more about our general outreach and how that includes business districts and business owners. Yeah, we actually met with Columbia Corridor Association, we're working with Waterfront. I'm gonna forget some of the acronyms. I'm not generally as familiar with those organizations, but a lot of the groups that represent the industrial businesses, both in Northwest Portland on Swan Island and then along Columbia Corridor. We also met with some labor unions to get a sense of not just the business associations, but also the workers in those areas. So yeah, we've heard really good feedback from those groups. We definitely recognize that tree canopy can be a challenge based on the different land use needs, trying to balance employment in those areas, recognizing that for workers who don't have a college education, those are some of the best employment opportunities in the city. So understanding how we can work with those groups. Those areas are pretty low canopy. I think industrial canopy coverage is around 8%. So we hear from a lot of people that needs to be higher. There's a lot of concern around the environmental impacts in those areas, the heat that workers are exposed to in those areas, while also understanding that there are a lot of demands in terms of the land use in those areas. So yeah, we have been talking with them. We'll definitely be in communication throughout the plan.
And just one follow-up question. Has there been any way to get maybe this is as a suggestion possibly of having community and businesses maybe be in the same room together to kind of talk about this? Because I kind of think that there's a little bit of a vacuum that could possibly be there. Yeah, just a suggestion.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Oh, and I'll make sure we answer any questions about business.
Yeah, in terms of sort of the other types of businesses more in commercial areas, we're in the process of scheduling conversations with those groups. There also has been actually quite a bit of outreach specifically around tree canopy in commercial areas by a few different PSU studies that have occurred in the past. So we're also using those, no need to reinvent the wheel. We'll learn from those and then have conversations to cover any gaps. So yeah, we're definitely speaking with those groups.
Okay, Vice Chair Thompson, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I had a question that builds a little bit on what Eli was asking about, and that's how the tree code relates to the accessibility of our urban environment. I'm wondering if you, in your outreach and engagement, have been engaging folks who have mobility differences specifically, or other disabilities that could come into play when we think about like the sidewalk issues that Eli raised. I'm just
Yeah, do you want
Yeah,
to take that?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you cut out a little bit at the end, but yes, we had a focus group specifically hearing from people with different types of mobility challenges. We also have some members on our engagement team who can speak to that as well, and we'll continue to engage with those groups. So definitely do want to be hearing what are those challenges in terms of visibility clearance on the street for routes and sidewalk repair, leaf pickup. Yeah, there's a lot of challenges that can come from having trees on our streets, and so we definitely want to continue to hear about those.
Okay, thank you. And then a second question, if I may, unrelated to the. I am interested in understanding how you all are looking back at the current tree code with regards to development requirements, and just seeking to understand if the current requirements for preserving existing trees, the fee and lieu program, things like that, if those requirements are performing as intended, or, you know, if there are opportunities for improvement. I'm just seeking to understand from a development standpoint what we can do to still ensure the outcomes that we're looking for as far as tree canopy and distribution, but also minimizing barriers to development where we're not, you know, maybe seeing the impact that we would like.
Yeah, that's absolutely something that we're looking at, and it's really part of our assessment of why has canopy declined in the last five years, or at least from 2014 to 2019. So we're looking at that a few ways. We're looking at the permit data in development to get a sense of in what part of the process are trees being removed, the size of those trees. You know, canopy loss is something that happens immediately. Canopy growth takes time. So we do know that from the tree code has been effective in planting far more trees than have been removed, but we don't quite know what the outcome of that planting is yet. And to be honest, there's not great data on what exactly was the species that was planted. So are we removing large, healthy trees that would have provided canopy for decades with smaller form trees that will never provide the canopy that was lost? So that's what we're looking at. One of the nice things about the canopy data we have is that we can actually identify what are all of the lots that went under development since Title 11, and how much canopy did we lose specifically on those lots. So we can actually get a pretty good sense of how many acres of canopy across the city did we lose directly from development. So that is a driver of canopy change is something that we're looking at. In terms of potential code changes, I think that level of detail would likely be outside of the scope of the specific plan. But we are planning to do already a project to update Title 11 after this plan is finalized. So that's been part of our multi-year work plan for a while. Title 11 is an implementation tool of the urban forest plan. So the idea is once we have updated visions and goals, one of the action items coming out of that is going to be doing an update to the code.
Thank you. Commissioner Routh, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm also going to ask a few questions. Thank you very much for that presentation, and thanks everyone to your smart questions. Related to community engagement, I'm curious what your efforts have been for TriMet ridership. Because corridors, trees, frequent service.
Go for it.
Yeah, one of them, this isn't community engagement, but one of the maps which we developed because we've heard so much from community is actually looking at canopy cover over those streets that are intended to have frequent transit service. But yeah, it's something our community advisory committee members have brought up a lot and had heard at other community events. Certainly there's a need and a concern to provide canopy coverage for people waiting for the bus. So yeah, that's definitely something we're looking at. And we do have TriMet representation actually on our technical advisory committee.
Just as someone who rides the 14 and the 72, and I spend about I can spend about 30 to 40 minutes just trying to figure out how to occupy my time, offering comments through a QR code, just saying. No. Also, and forgive my ignorance, is residential trees, is that part of the, within the scope of the plan? Okay. Because one thing that I've just been, especially related not just to the extreme heat events, but also extreme cold events, and that how that stresses trees over time and how that stresses adjacent residents. And I'm curious what, if any, remedies you're hearing or have looked at in peer cities. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know of any remedies in peer cities that have been identified on that specifically, but it's absolutely a topic that's come up, and I think in every advisory committee discussion and engagement that we've had, particularly just the timing of our engagement following exactly during the storm. If we had done our engagement in August, I think we would have heard about heat islands a little bit more, but we're hearing a lot of concern around maintenance of trees and private property. So it's something that's been on our radar for a while, and there are some programs, some existing programs. I think REACH has funding that can help people take care of the trees in their property, but it's not nearly enough. And so I think we've talked a lot about both a programmatic response, what can that look like? I think PSEF has been open to what are some ways we could do that. Can it be providing funding to nonprofits that help property owners take care of their trees? So definitely something that we've heard, and it's a priority for us too. I mean, we will have a much healthier forest if people have the resources to take care of their trees. But I think there's also an education component there as well. I think that's something that Urban Forest is looking to really grow is what is the outreach that we can do in terms of helping people understand the role that trees play, but also what does it take to take care of a tree? I think a lot of times trees fail. Some proactive maintenance maybe could have prevented that from happening. So, but these are just things that I think are just gaps in some of the programming right now.
Great. I have a follow-up question, and then I'll go to you, Commissioner Alexander, Chair O'Meara, for the record. So the heat island mapping has been great and really extensive and has informed all sorts of policy decisions and planning work. Related to Commissioner Routh's question, I'm wondering if there is an intention to do storm vulnerability mapping, and essentially, if there's a way to sort of track the data around, for example, the latest ice storm that we saw, where did we see trees fall, and especially those that damaged property, right? Is there a type, an age, sort of a way of classifying that so that we can start to develop that extreme weather, not the heat weather, but the extreme storms, wind and ice, et cetera, and start to look at, are there parts of the city that are more vulnerable? So just curious if there's been conversation around that.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have mapped the tree failures that we saw in the storm, largely clustered in those in the southwest, and then sort of the deeper southeast, which does have a lot of high canopy areas, a lot of Douglas firs there. Haven't talked about mapping in terms of like a vulnerability. I think that's really, I think that's something I'll have to take back to our team. That's not something that we've talked about, but that's a really interesting approach. Yeah.
Thank you.
This is a Vice Chair Pouncil. It's a follow up on Chair O'Meara's comment too. There's been some new science too on trees and grouping, so I know that, they're typically stronger together in clusters. So I'm also wondering if there's any investigation or any, looking into like what parts of the city are probably better for like canopy, for clumping or grouping of trees for the for longevity, and knowing that they can survive a storm, by being placed together, and maybe having some type of inventory or a mapping on on vulnerable large trees that aren't clustered together that could pose property hazards, to businesses or residents.
Yeah, I'm not sure of how we would be able to map it specifically. It's very much like a site by site consideration, but it is something that we've as part of the assessment that we do in terms of tree risk, that is something that plays into it. And one of the code changes we actually made about 3 or 4 years ago was to allow the impact on other trees to be part of the assessment of whether a tree is able to be removed. And partly because previously the code might allow you to remove one tree in a grove, but actually makes the other trees hazardous because those trees grew with this tree here preventing wind coming in or destabilize the soil. So that kind of holistic approach to what tree risk looks like, that is something that we've been aware of and been able to make some improvements on so that we're able to assess that. The idea of mapping that risk, I think, could be really challenging. But there are just certain areas of the city, I think East Portland in particular, still has a lot of these sort of like remnant groves of Douglas firs, and how do we preserve those, knowing that removing one or two could actually expose the rest? So,
Commissioner Alexander, go ahead.
A follow-up question, the question regarding TriMet in terms of just sort of comfort zones, but I'm curious as to how any of the infrastructure development over the last decade from TriMet, whether it's along Lincoln or I'm thinking Holgate, I mean, there's tremendous displacement of a number of old, I don't want to say old growth trees, but they were certain, I'm sorry, Mike Alexander for the record. But when we look at infrastructure development, is there an offset that takes place at some point? Because there clearly has been the removal of a significant number of trees in neighborhoods that are now a part of a transportation pathway.
yeah. So any capital project that happens in the city, urban forestry is part of it. We have a tree inspector assigned to identify the opportunities to preserve trees where we can, and what are the tree planting opportunities as part of that project. It can be challenging in a constrained right of way to accommodate all the uses that we have there, particularly in projects where we're adding bus platforms and bike lanes and sidewalks and things like that. So I think there's really good work happening on that front in terms of minimizing the impacts to trees. But there have been a lot of projects that have removed a significant number of trees and lost canopy from that. And we that is something that we hear from residents after some projects are built, that they're not satisfied with the outcomes. And there's often reasons for that. The city is trying to balance a lot of different needs. But yeah, that is one of the ways that we've lost trees. Yeah.
Commissioner Lang, go ahead.
Wade Lang for the record. I noticed in the 2004 study that you talk about part of what you did look at erosion, soil erosion and stuff, and how that can be prevented. And our last meeting, we had the Land Division Code presentation, and we were talking about landslides, and the state provided information on landslide areas and kind of updated that. Do you guys work in that arena to identify those same areas and what can be done from a urban forestry standpoint to maybe mitigate some of that potential hazard?
Yeah, that's a great question. We obviously work with Bureau of Plan Sustainability when there's updates to Title 33, and we're and seeing like what the changes they're making to the landslide map. We haven't really discussed sort of like programmatic things that we could do in terms of prioritizing tree planting or any sort of like natural area restoration in some of those overlay zones. So I think that's something I have to get back to you on, honestly. That's not something we've really talked about in the past.
Commissioner, if I might, Patricia Diefendorfer for the record. You may recall, and we are going to be talking more about the Land Division Code just after this presentation, but you may recall that trees are part of the regulations that, you know, when you're doing a division of land, trees are among the things that you have to kind of document, you know, that you're meeting a certain threshold, a certain standard. If you recall, we actually, as part of the clear and objective standard, we actually upped the tree requirement a little bit because there are limitations on, you know, removal of trees. And if you remove trees, there's size constraints and all that. I'm sure Morgan can explain it much better than I. But so I think all of the regulatory environment, I know we've coordinated with the Parks and Recreation Bureau in developing those regulations, in fact. So all of those regulations are intended to work together to try to minimize the loss of trees when subdivision of land is occurring. I don't know if that's helpful, but it is among the regulations, and the code updates that we're doing now create a pathway for, in the clear and objective standards that try to maintain kind of the level of trees that the requirements that we have now.
Yeah, I recall that, and I was thinking more of going beyond preserving what's there and looking at mitigation beyond to you know, do prevention beyond the property identified, because landslides typically come from places other than one particular plot. So is there opportunity there to explore, you know, further plantings and stuff that might help that? So.
Well, thank you both so much for that presentation and for taking all of our inquiries and questions. You can see there's a lot of interest about forestry and tree health and canopy on the commission, so we really appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to hearing updates and also having you back for the tree code item, which will be coming before the Planning Commission here, I think, in a few months. So thank you both so much.
Great. Thanks everyone.
Thank you. So we'll transition now to our next item of business, which is the Land Division Code Update Work Session. So I will welcome up BPS staff Sandra Wood and Morgan Tracy. And while they're coming up, I will ask if any commissioners have any items for disclosure related to this item on the agenda. Okay, I'm just checking online and I'm not seeing indication of anything. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Sandra and Morgan. Welcome.
Thank you. I just want to express my appreciation for that last question and giving us a nice segue to the next topic. So I'm Morgan Tracy, Senior Planner with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. With me is Sandra Wood. I'm waiting for my computer to warm up, so maybe she can say a few comments to get us started.
Sure. I'll get us reoriented here. Thank you very much for having me. I'm the Code Development Manager and work with Morgan on this project. We've had a public hearing for the Land Division project. We had a few pieces of testimony in the MAP app and then some oral testimony at the last meeting. Both the oral and written record closed at the last meeting. And we have been, as you recall, during that meeting, we also had discussions about some folks may have received a Measure 56 notice that we send out and may have just general questions about what does it mean for my property. So Morgan has been fielding some of those questions from members of the public still. But most people, when they find out, oh, this doesn't really mean anything unless I'm dividing my property, then they seem quite satisfied, at least from what I've overheard over the cubicle wall. So we'll get started here. We have a short presentation with just to refresh your memory on what the Land Division Code is. And
I think that's better.
yes. And a little sneak peek, I think We heard from a couple of commissioners on some potential amendments that they would like to advance, and we had a couple of conversations. So last week on Thursday, we went ahead and published a memo with potential amendments. And it's possible that you could take on those amendments today and vote on the package. So that's what we are hoping for. And I'm trying to buy time. There you go.
That is not what I wanted to be sharing.
It's hard when the previous project ends kind of abruptly. You don't know when the questions are going to end.
There we go. No, it's this one. Okay.
That's today.
Great. Thanks for your patience. So as Sandra explained, a lot of background on this project. With me this evening, just a few other staff to help me along the way. We have Shannon Buono, who's a senior planner and code editor with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Kate Green should be joining us virtually or maybe behind me, and I'm not noting. And Jason Butler Brown, so he's the engineering supervisor for site development section of BDS. So if we get into real deep questions on the landslide hazard stuff, I'm going to bring him up here. So our agenda for today, I'm going to provide a very brief high-level overview of the project, as we covered that at the hearing last month, just kind of a reminder of what we've covered. I'll go into more detail on landslide hazard mapping, sort of in response to the questions that came up at our last meeting. We'll spend a little time with some Q&A if there are additional questions that have come up for the commission since then. Review the potential amendments that I shared last week in a memo. And possibly, if we get through those amendments, we can go for a vote on the package. So pretty exciting, all in one work session. So just a reminder, the project was initiated in part to respond to the City Council's resolve to streamline housing development. It also incorporates changes to conform to the state's requirements for clear and objective standards that relate to residential development. The last major update to our land division regulations was more than 20 years ago. So, the types of land divisions that we were seeing then have changed fairly significantly. These days, we're seeing more smaller, discrete infill sites as opposed to those larger greenfield subdivisions. There are three key proposals in the project. As I mentioned, the project is proposing to augment the current land division rules with a parallel set of clear and objective standards, which give applicants the chance to, or the choice to, address either standards or criteria. It's sort of a mix and match system of getting through those regulations. We are also taking the opportunity to update the 20-plus-year-old landslide hazard map with new data information. And the third proposal is really a number of various changes in process improvements to streamline land division reviews, especially for those smaller, less complex land division sites. So we are here on the project timeline at the Planning Commission. We expect to be at City Council this summer with adopted changes slated to go into effect by October 1st. And just a quick counting of testimony. You've heard from 16 testifiers so far through the MAP app and orally at the last hearing. And I've heard from 57 people related to our Measure 56 hotline calls, responding to questions about the landslide hazard mapping. So, since the commission heard testimony from several people about the proposed update to the potential landslide hazard area map, I wanted to spend a few minutes going deeper into our methodology and respond to some questions that have come up. As a reminder, the proposal is to replace the 20-plus-year-old map with a new updated version. The map shows areas where there may be a higher risk of landslides occurring, and the regulations associated with this map are only triggered when someone applies for a land division, in which case they'd be required to submit a geotech report or assessment with their application. It's important to note, as we're talking about this, that this is very different from our environmental zone overlay maps, which regulate all sorts of activity, including non-development on a continual day-to-day basis, like planting, what you can plant, what you can prune, trees you can remove. This is really a tool for submittal requirements, basically when a land division is being applied for. So our current landslide hazard data is derived from 3 sets of data from 1997 and 1998. The first is a study that was performed by a Portland State University professor in conjunction with Metro. We used Metro slope data for anything that was 15% or greater slope, and an inventory of the landslides that occurred during the very eventful 1996 storm. This updated map uses more recent information from the State Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, or DOGAMI. I kind of wish they'd called it the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, then it'd be ORGAMI. Nonetheless, DOGAMI produced map series for the entire state and categorizes different types of landslide risks and severity. In addition to the most recent landslide inventory, these landslide types include potentially rapid moving landslides, in other words, mud flows, deep-seated landslide susceptibility, so this is like big mass hillside movement, and shallow landslide susceptibility, which are landslides, defined as landslides that are up to 15 feet deep. And you'll notice I've circled that last one, and we'll come back to that in a minute. So by way of comparison, the map on the left in blue shows the extent of our current landslide map, which covers roughly 35,000 properties. The orange map to the right is our proposed updated map, which covers about 25,000 properties. And when we just look at the residentially zoned lots, the updated map removed about 13,000 of those lots and added back about 2,600. So I mentioned I'd come back to the shallow landslide. And part of the issue, our challenge in incorporating the shallow landslide hazard data is that it's very sensitive to the topography that's based on really sensitive LiDAR data. In this slide, you can see a comparison between 2 areas. On the top is a larger contiguous slope that should be studied if a land division were to propose lots or new streets across that area, so that sort of taller slope down to the street there. The lower image shows a smaller slope, which is a common feature you see in many Portland front yards. And LiDAR is picking up both of these, and the soil characteristics for this area are the same, so it gets picked up as having a potential for shallow landslides. So to adjust the sharpness, quote unquote, of that LiDAR data, we applied a GIS tool to smooth some of those features. And we went through an exercise of testing different grid cell sizes to find the relative sweet spot between capturing too many properties and removing the mapping area from areas where there were known landslide issues. And we found the best balance using this 12 by 12 smoothing grid. So a lot of testing and retesting. But you can see here that the larger slope is still identified by that area in blue, and that smaller front yard slope has been removed from the landslide map. So taking that and stepping back a little bit, this is kind of where we started, our problem statement, if you will, for the shallow landslide data. It resulted in a lot, it's probably hard to see on this screen, but there are a lot of little freckles all over the city, and really encompassed and captured far too much than what we would be normally concerned with in a land division type application. So we went from a map that looked like this to a map that looked like this, so much cleaner. Which is to say we've already done extensive filtering to limit the potential landslide hazard map to areas that are reasonable to request a geotech engineer take a closer look as part of that land division application. So what does it mean to be on the map? And this is pretty much in response to some of the comments that I heard taking phone calls and some of the testimony you've heard. Basically, this map is reflecting areas that have the slope and soil characteristics that are consistent with the potential for a landslide occurring, but it's not really a predictor of a landslide occurring. It's only an indication of where there's a higher potential for that landslide to occur. So it's not like alarm bells are going off. It's more like, hey, we want to take a closer look at this. Because of this, when someone is wanting to divide their property into smaller lots, it's important to understand where the risks are higher or lower to design the location of the lots and infrastructure. So this is why the report is only needed when doing a land division. And if a property owner doesn't intend to divide their land, then this particular map is not relevant. And finally, there was concern that being on this map could impact somebody's insurance rates or the ability to obtain insurance. And I'm glad this question came up. It caused me to look a little deeper. Some of the things to remember, first of all, these landslide maps already exist. The state Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries created these maps, and they've been around since 2002 and more recently updated in 2018. So the data already exists at the statewide level. But I think more critical is this proposed map is developed from a subset of that state map data, and we post-processed it a little bit, using elements that are relevant to the question of land division design. So the map is not necessarily relevant or appropriate for other uses. And then in looking at some of the insurance carrier information, they talk about the landslide insurance is usually, it's not included with typical insurance, it's a rider. And people can seek to get landslide insurance if they so choose, but it's not typically part of the general level of insurance. So someone may decide to take a look at this map and decide that they want to insure themselves against the potential for a landslide. I wouldn't use this map though. I would use, nope, not that map, Dogami's maps. And just for sort of more general information about Dogami, there's a website there. The second URL is impossible to remember. I'm not suggesting you try to type all that down. I would just Google statewide landslide story map, but it's a really good website for going through the purpose of this landslide information that the state has collected and how their program functions and the uses for that information. More specific to the land division question, just a reminder, this map shows us there's a property that has a potential landslide hazard area that triggers the need for a geotechnical report. That report is going to translate that sort of general indication of a landslide and identify, A, whether there really is a landslide risk, or if there is, where that risk is present, and give a detailed assessment of those risks on the site. And that allows us to redesign the land division site to sort of avoid those areas and place building sites where it's safer to do so. So that's my spiel on landslides. In terms of what's coming up, I guess this brings us to the more interactive part of the work session. So general questions about the landslide risk. I have an expert in the audience that can help us with those. If there are other general questions that the commissioners have had time to think about in terms of the land division project overall, and then we can talk about amendments if we get to that, or when we get to that.
Commissioner Lang, go ahead.
Wade Lang, for the record. In our training, it never came up to us that there was no such thing as a stupid question. So this may be a stupid question. Oregon Geology also does earthquake maps, right? And they look at liquefaction and stuff. Is there a crossover between landslides and liquefaction? Do they try and identify those? And are they separate, or are they part of this as well?
They do that, and that's not a stupid question. I probably don't have the right answer. I have a half an answer. They do have mapping for earthquake potential based on different severities of earthquakes and liquefaction potential. Those are sort of other parts of this mapping series. So there's landslide map series, and there are different maps for that, and then there's earthquake map series that are also different. The part that I can't answer is whether they cross those two together for any particular thing.
Chair O'Meara, for the record, I just really appreciate the level of detail that all of you went through in the mapping exercise. Really impressed with that. And also appreciate the innovation around the subdivisions and the example you gave with how we could actually work with that information and still achieve a subdivision that produces the same amount of lots, ideally, right? And so really appreciate that innovation. So not questions for me, but just appreciation for all the work and innovation that's gone into this to help also appease, I think, a lot of landowners' concerns, right? Any questions or comments on this portion of the presentation before we move on to amendments? Okay, I think we're ready for that. The amendment overview, is that, Sandra, you'll be providing that in terms of what we have before us?
Actually, I think we have a slide for it, but I want to make
Perfect.
sure that the commissioners and online, we posted on April 19th, a memo called the Land Division Update Project Potential Amendments. There is a list on the slide here, and Morgan will walk us through how to do that.
Yeah, so I mean, these are, there's 7 technical amendments, 1 additional amendment that Commissioner Spivak has requested. We could go through them individually. They're not super interesting, the technical amendments, but if you have questions about any of those, I'm happy. I've got slides to walk us through. So I think I'll start with a question of the commission if you want to go into the technical clarifications. As a suggestion in terms of how to move these amendments forward, we are suggesting taking the technical clarification amendments together as a package and voting on those and then voting on the second amendment.
Yeah, so we would be looking for a motion and a second on Amendment 1, which is all the technical clarifications. And then we can discuss Amendment 2.
Commissioner Lang?
It was 1G, where it says, clarify that study is not required for new street intersections when both streets are local classifications. What is local classification?
And, you know, who couldn't make it tonight was our PBOT representative, but I think I've got this one. So we have several street classifications from a local residential street, which is your typical neighborhood street. Then we have neighborhood collectors, which are generally the ones that have a yellow line down the middle. Then we have more major arterial streets, and then moving on up to highways and then freeways. So it's kind of the lowest, less volume, less traffic volume type of street.
Okay, any additional clarifications or questions on package 1, the technical clarifications? Okay, is commission ready to vote? Is there a motion to vote on that package of amendments before we proceed to the second package?
I'm happy to move to adopt. Is adopt the correct?
Yeah, it's move amendment number
Move
1.
on amendment number 1. Thank you. I was like, what is that?
Thank you, Commissioner Routh. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Patel. And is this a roll call item, Jolie? Okay, please advance to roll call.
Great. Alexander,
Aye.
Lang,
Aye.
Patel,
Aye.
Council,
Aye.
Routh,
Aye.
Spivak,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
O'Meara.
Aye. So that amendment package is approved. And we can now move to the second package of amendments, which I believe includes 2 items.
No, the second amendment, this was requested by Commissioner Spivak, and it's a little bit difficult to explain, but if we think about how the clear and objective standards are applied for someone trying to meet the transportation impact requirements. Right now, the standards say you have to be zoned single dwelling, which those single dwelling zones allow for house, duplex, triplex, or fourplex. You're not proposing more than 10 lots, or you have a specific development proposal that caps your daily trips, and you're taking access from a local street. Commissioner Spivak pointed out that in multi-dwelling zones, if you're proposing a certain size of lots, they are de facto limited to certain types of housing, like a house, duplex, triplex, or fourplex. So his suggestion was to enable multi-dwelling zones to use those same standards. So just by sort of image comparison, on the left is single dwelling zones, on the right would be a multi-dwelling zone. Essentially, they look the same, they have the same level of impact. One currently is subject to standards, the other is subject to discretionary criteria just by virtue of how that was set up. Anything to add, Commissioner Spivak?
Thanks for the summary. And I should say that one element of this project, which is terrific, is to have a standards path for many of the elements that otherwise would have been discretionary under current rules. And I know that in practice, some developers who own multifamily property just treat them like single dwelling property. The densities are not all that different. And so my thinking is that let's let them use the standards path for effectively the same situation you see on your picture in front of you. If the lot's multi-dwelling and they're going to divide it into single dwelling lots, let's just let them have the standards path there as well. I don't know how often this would happen. It is admittedly a bit of verbiage to the code, but I have seen a few times people who own multifamily properties. I would always do multifamily more compact than I sort of push limits on density, but not everyone does that. And this would give you a chance for someone who just wants to really divide it into some effectively single family lots to do so through the standards route.
Any questions on the proposed amendment by Commissioner Spivak?
I guess I will formally propose this amendment for, yeah, I'll, is that the right word? And
You will move.
I'll move this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Spivak. Do we have a second?
Commissioner Routh, happy to second.
Okay. Any discussion? Commissioner Lang.
From your perspective, is this a good amendment? Does it help kind of clarify and simplify?
So staff is supportive of the amendment in terms of its, the same level of impact between these two situations. I think Eli touched on the one concern that we have in terms of adding extra verbiage to the code, and we often hear criticism about how lengthy and complicated the code can be. So it's really a matter of trying to balance those two interests.
Okay, additional discussion? All right, I think we're ready for roll call. Julie?
Great. So reminder, this is just on this second amendment. Alexander,
Can't say that I'm as clear as a bell on this, but aye.
Lang,
Aye.
Patel,
Aye.
Council,
Aye.
Routh,
Aye.
Spivak,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
O'Mara.
Aye. Amendment 2 is approved. And do we have further discussion before we consider a vote on the full package? Is commission, any additional discussion or questions? Just checking online for our commissioners. I am not, Commissioner Spivak, go ahead.
Yeah, I have one thing I'll just bring up. This is not part of this directly in this amendment, but as I hear people discuss the land division process in Portland, the biggest item I hear is not actually part of this code project. It's that people, if you're going to do a land division and you want to build homes on that same site, under current practice from BDS, you have to submit your application for the land division, and then you get your preliminary approval of the land division. And then it can be 4 or 5 months later before you get the final approval of the land division. And only at that time can you submit your building permit application. And I understand that historically, and that's a lot of time to sit on land that you own or are paying interest on. So it's not part of this project, but I think that I hope that BDS will look over that process and consider allowing someone to submit their building permits when they have the preliminary approval, so that can happen in parallel with the remainder of the land use process. I recognize that in the past, at least, the preliminary approvals have been a little bit haven't dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's yet, but those have become much more thorough, I think, more recently. And furthermore, the city's had to figure out how to do this because with the middle housing land division, you're doing that land division while you're building the building. So the city has figured out how to do some of these things in parallel that perhaps they were not doing in the past. So I'm not sure, this is not part of the project, but I hope that maybe we have in our letter or something like this, a request that BDS consider allowing the building permit submittal and the going from preliminary to final plat approval to happen in parallel. Because otherwise you get a piece of land, if you have to divide it, you could be 18 months before you even get to submit your building permits.
Thank you, Commissioner Spivak. I'm wondering if that would be an item for consideration for the new centralized permitting function in terms of if that commentary can be shared in that venue, if that might be the appropriate venue. And I don't know if, Patricia,
makes
you have a
sense to
sense of
me,
if that would
Commissioner.
fall under their purview.
As far as I can hear, it's not written down anywhere how this process works. It's a practice. So I think that recommendation makes sense.
We'd certainly be happy to pass that along to our colleagues at the Bureau of Development Services. And I think as they're continuing to work on the permit streamlining and all the processes, that could be another input that can be provided. And we do have someone here from the Bureau of Development Services who was kind enough to join us to answer questions. So we're also sharing that with him right now. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm not seeing indication of other questions or discussion, so I think we can take a motion. And I do see on my laptop the recommendation, but I'm not seeing it on the main screen. There we go. Okay, so do we have a motion to recommend to City Council the proposed land division code update?
I so move.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Alexander.
Second.
I will second. You don't?
A second by Commissioner Lang. Any discussion? Okay, we'll proceed to roll call. Please, Julie.
Great, thank
Can,
you.
can I just clarify that the motion included everything that's on the slide, which is to adopt the report and commentaries for the legislative intent, amend Title 33 per the proposed draft as amended tonight, and then repeal the 2002 potential landslide hazard map.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Alexander,
Aye.
Lang,
Thank you for coming back and digging a little deeper on that stuff. Really appreciate it. Helped me a lot based on the testimony we heard. So thank you. Aye.
Patel,
Aye.
Council,
Aye.
Routh,
I want to thank you, Morgan, for making yourself very available to us and to that and everyone who called the hotline. Aye.
Spivak,
Thanks to Morgan and Shannon for going into the details. Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
O'Meara.
Aye. The package is approved and will be advanced to council.
Great. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for all of your work.
Are there any thoughts on what you would like to include in the letter to City Council, in your transmittal letter?
Commissioner Spivak, did you want your comment regarding the streamlining to be included?
I would see I'm open to staff's opinion on this. I mean, I think that I would like to convey it somehow. Whether it needs to go in the letter, I'm not sure.
Commissioner Spivak, I'm sorry, Sandra, did you want to jump in? Maybe.
I think we heard the message loud and clear. I was thinking, I meet with the BDS supervisor for that whole team, all the planners every week, and I can definitely pass this along to her. There's definitely state laws about preliminary and final plat. It's not like Portland just came up with this idea and that we wanted to do a two-step process for land division. There's state rules on that. And it's also in the zoning code how that process plays out. But I can definitely bring this to her attention. It seems like probably with everything that city council has on their plate right now, it's probably, they're not, it seems like the best audience for this, but BDS management, I'm sure, would be interested in knowing how to advance this idea.
That makes sense to me. I guess I'll say one thing for the letter different from this is just to appreciate I'm always a fan of clear and objective processes and standards when we can in the zoning code. So I think it's great that this creates those paths for land divisions. So I think that's a great improvement that this land division code provides. And also the fact that you can pick section by section, you can decide whether you want to clear and objective or discretionary. You don't have to have a project that can go through the standards process on every element of a land use review. You can sort of pick the ones you want, which is a great way of formulating it.
Thank you. Vice Chair Pouncil.
Yeah, this is Vice Chair Pouncil. Yeah, I just wanted to give support to Commissioner Spivak's suggestion. I'm in the throes of developing and having things in parallel and working together is super, super important. It really does save a lot of time and money. So I just wanted to lend my support to his suggestion.
Chair O'Meara, for the record, I would expect that you will summarize the feedback we received right during the public testimony period, and then also the hotline, the volume, and really just want to appreciate again in the context of the letter all of the work and response that you've provided as staff. So would request that those numbers are included.
Great. Well, if anything else occurs to you, please let us know. We'll be sure to do that. I want to do one final shout out to not just Morgan for leading the team and other people that you've seen here, but I'm looking at the third page and the acknowledgements in our report, and our technical advisory committee has 14 members from Bureau of Development Services, Bureau of Transportation, Bureau of Environmental Services, the Water Bureau, Parks and Urban Forestry, both Brian and Belinda, who were just here for their previous item, and then the Fire Bureau have been, I think this group of people have gotten into this technicality that you saw today for one single item. They've gotten into this deep for many, many things. And because of their hard work, I think our work here was a lot of a lighter lift. So thank you to all of them.
Thank you. Amazing collaboration on this. And Commissioner Spivak, did you have another item? Or was your hand left up from? Okay, that was left up. All right. Well, thank you all so much. And that was our last item. So I will go ahead and adjourn us. And I hope everybody can go out and enjoy the little bit that's left of this beautiful day. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.